Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So today we have Prabhjot Ji and Randip Ji with us, and we decided to start a new podcast on Gursevak.com where we just go through the journey of different Gursevak parents, whether that be parents who are raising their kids as in this Western society, parents who came from different countries, young parents, old parents, all of them. So we're starting off with these two, and we're just going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves first.
If you don't know Randip Ji, go check out the Journey podcast.
Yeah, and if you haven't, you're slipping. Go do that. Actually, listen to this first and then go to that.
Okay. And we'll basically be introducing Prabhjot Ji today.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Prabhjot, and I've been working in the social work field for, I guess, the last over 10 years. And in the last little while, I've really turned towards looking at mindfulness and the way mindful parenting or mindfulness in relationships, and using that as more of a framework of the type of work that I'm doing. And so, of course, now having had a little one for 4 years, I've had a chance to practice some of these things as well. And so, yes, that's a little bit about me, just really interested in looking at different ways of parenting, different styles, and always wanting to learn and evolve.
Were there ever moments where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this with my kid because this is what I learned from mindfulness, and then you're like, try it, and then it's like, it did not work. And it's like, this is not going to work with my kid.
For sure, or it evolves over time. Like sometimes when you read something in a book, or at least I found that, like sometimes I would read something in a parenting, like in a mindful book, and like it plays out one way in your mind, and then in the present moment, as it's unfolding, like your mind is like, wait, what was that concept again? Mm-hmm. But then as you're in it, you're like, wait, maybe this is what even the book meant. Like maybe when I first read whatever I was reading about mindful parenting, I didn't connect some of the other pieces together. And like now I see it unfolding in a different way. So even with like mindful parenting, I saw or with myself using some of those techniques, like the first time I even tried to like implement it on myself, like I probably did the opposite of mindful parenting, and it probably took like a couple of years to really start to get grounded in some of the techniques and having them evolve in a different way, letting go of some techniques, or like noticing when certain techniques are working and making that more stronger in like our more day-to-day, like bringing it in a more stronger way when we're with Yannick in our lives. So it definitely is always evolving, I think.
So you were mentioning mindful parenting. What is that?
Okay.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Mindful parenting is probably like the opposite of traditional Punjabi parenting that we all probably grew up with. And I know when I do it, like my parents, sometimes Randeep's parents are like, like they're so confused, like tusi to theek nikale ya.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did we really though? So mindful parenting is this, like, it's coming from this perspective that we as parents need to be more aware of our own thoughts and emotions, and that's what trickles onto the child versus it's the child that's doing something wrong. Right? So that it's the belief that in the moment as a parent, are we just reacting to our child's behavior versus us tuning into what's taking place in our own bodies, and actually taking a moment to like, pause, see what's showing up for us, whatever emotions are showing up for us. And first, in that moment, tending to ourselves and then tending to our child. Versus you're seeing a child doing something that perhaps you disapprove of, and right away you try to go out and correct that behavior. So it's not about that automatic reactionary way of either correcting or inserting yourself when it comes to parenting. It's actually taking more of a step back and seeing what's showing up for yourself and thinking, is this a moment when I do need to step in? How should I be stepping in at this moment? And what is the way that I can support my little one at this moment right now? So taking a few moments before you take that first step versus reacting automatically.
Can you give an example of how you do that? like a situation with Yannick Singh if he's like throwing a tantrum if he does.
He throws many. I think Yannick was like the perfect child to practice all of this because he was not the perfect. Like, I mean,
man, he's super wild.
He's extremely wild, and he throws so many tantrums from day one. Like, I still remember the day he turned 2, he had his first tantrum, and it never ended. And like prior to that, like from the moment he was born to like a good year, it was just like everything a mom or dad probably imagines as being like the perfect sweet child. He was the opposite of that. Like the amount of crying he had, or like us just being exhausted. So like an example would be, for example, when he's having, and I've seen this with myself, so I'll use my own example. When he is having a tantrum, it really over time meant like, okay, I'm noticing my own anger is starting to show up. I'm starting to notice my own thoughts showing up of like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why can't I be a better parent? Why am I in this situation? Why can't I do something that like makes him not want to tantrum? Why am I being judged by others while he's having a tantrum, right? So at first I noticed my own insecurities showing up. And so it really means like in that moment, you have like, you check into yourself and you notice like, okay, I'm like, you know, I notice like right now my chest is really clenched, or my stomach is really clenched, or my hands are really clenched, right? And in that moment, you're bringing your mind back online, right? So what they say is like, even with kids, we can go into fight or flight mode, right? Like as a parent, because when a child is having a tantrum, as a parent, our mind doesn't understand that, like, you know, it's this young child who is defenseless and they just need our support. Our mind goes into our own protective mechanism. Like, we start becoming fearful, our own insecurities rise, right? And so we revert back into this like more animalistic brain of trying to protect ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And usually that would unfold by like, you know, when we get heightened by our child's reaction at that moment and we don't take a moment to pause, like you start snapping at your child, you raise your own voice, you get angry, you tell them like, go into another room, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to see you, type of thing, right? And so it becomes an adult version of a tantrum is what they say, right? And the reason that the adult version of a tantrum works is because we are physically stronger, we are louder, and so the child has no like choice but to obey, right? Like they're not doing it because they want to, they're doing it because of fearful, because there's a much larger creature than them who is now threatening them in return. And so they in their own protective mechanism kicks in, which is at that moment they drop the tantrum because now they're fearful, but their fearfulness is coming from this person that I'm looking for comfort towards has all of a sudden become the person I'm scared of. Mm-hmm. So I just need to like be quiet, obey, and like make sure that I'm not doing anything that might now further upset this other human being. So in that moment with mindful parenting, it's more starting to become aware of our own tantrum wanting to arise, our own anger starting to come up, our own frustration, and seeing how and it's a very quick like thing that's happening simultaneously in your mind and then the other piece is, while this child is having a tantrum, from a mindful parenting perspective, would be more at the same time you're also trying to soothe the child. So soothing would be if they allow you to hold them, to hug them, you know, to gently give them a soothing touch by rubbing their arm if they're allowing it. If they're not, because they're just crying a lot and they don't want to have that, because some kids might not want to, you let them have the tantrum, but you let them do it in a safe space where like you're not telling them to be quiet, or you're not telling them like, if you do that again, watch what happens next time. Is just allowing the process to unfold, and they will come out of it. Sometimes it takes like 10-15 minutes, but like how long can a human really cry for, right? Mm-hmm. Like eventually the emotion for them is going to release and their body's going to relax. And then once it comes into that mode, that's where you can like go into the next step of connecting with them, and asking them, like inquiring, like what happened. And like kids are really great at actually, if you're willing to listen and being open to it, they'll tell you what's wrong. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's also being aware of like, is it time for like, is it because they're hungry? Is it because they're tired, right? Like sometimes I think Yannick's had tantrums in the past because like there was like a wedding in the family, and like he's exhausted because he's going from event to event to event, and like everyone's like, oh, roi janda, right? Obviously he's overstimulated, right? So are we really doing the best parenting then by taking to him all these events where he is going to get overstimulated, and like we're putting him pretty much against himself? Or would it have been more soothing for him to be somewhere for only 15-20 minutes and then you leave, right? So myself, like that's the way sometimes I see myself implementing it. So like, for example, when he's having a tantrum, really noticing my own anger is arising, noticing how my jaw starts to get clenched, noticing like those thoughts of insecurities coming up, and then instead of reacting to all of that, just taking a breath and staying with the breath, or you can stay with the shabad, whatever your anchor is, and like just grounding yourself in that moment of whatever is showing up without really having to, in a way, do anything. And it's also giving the space for that child to release all of that pent-up emotion. Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. It reminded me of something that Baba always tells us. They're like, knowing that kids are smaller and yelling at them is like a huge sin. They're like, I don't know if anybody tried it, maybe you can try this next. They're like, touch the kids' feet and show them. That way they're like, they're learning nimrata, they're learning Gareebi. Right? Like how you were saying that stimulation, like touch their arms if they want to. But Budgie's like touch their feet.
Yeah. Because I think it's really about showing respect to the child, right? I think like we always think like respect comes to those that are older than us. But I think it's like a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
You really have to be able to connect with and have the like patience and the openness to let a little child want to connect to you, and not come across as like, I know everything, I don't make mistakes, I have my life figured out, and therefore now you need to follow exactly the footsteps I've laid out. At the end of the day, they're here for their own journey. You're just here as a guide, right? And it's more to stand beside them rather to stand in front of them and be like, follow my steps. Right? You're just there to, if they fall, help them back up, but be like, okay, keep going. Like, find your journey, find your path.
Bro, talk about the point of like, you know, like you are not your anger. You are not like, you know, I mean, even throughout our whole, I mean, social work history, I guess we've been doing this type of stuff. But, you know, like saying, oh, you know, he's a schizophrenic.
Oh,
like
yeah,
just, you know, just labeling the individual as, you know, he's this. That's a part of what's going on inside him.
Yes.
You know, that person has schizophrenia right now. Like that's what his current state is. But that doesn't mean he is that. He is much more than that. He has a lot of other things flowing inside and happening for him. So how do we, I guess, deal with Yannick in that sense that, you know, when anger rises, how do we label anger? When his fear rises, you know, we do all that kind of work with him. How do we do all that?
So I mean, what you're highlighting, especially because you have that background in therapy, like therapists will do that where it's labeling the emotion, right? And so that's something I've learned through like mindful parenting as well, you could say, or aware parenting, is that like when we're saying, for example, you are a good boy, you're a bad boy, what you're doing is now labeling that individual with that label, right? All humans are good, right? It's the action, the behavior that may either be positive or negative. But at the end of the day, us as all humans are still essentially rooted in goodness. So when we say to a young child, especially, you're a bad boy or you're being a bad boy, what the voice that's speaking to him or her inside and becomes a voice of their mind is that I'm a bad human. Or if you're always saying, you're a good boy. Because some kids, like, they don't tantrum. They're very, like, from day one, like, they show these attributes of, like, you know, being very go with the flow, you know, just very chill back babies. But they might also get the label of, you're a good girl or good boy. And the problem with these type of labels is that as you grow older, you feel like you always need to stay within that label, right? So if you do something that is, for example, rebellious, but you're always considered a good child, what happened? I thought you were always good. So now you put this individual into a box of where they're never allowed to freely explore because they're supposed to maintain this label of being good or bad. Versus if a child is doing a behavior that's like negative or positive, you're correcting the behavior. So if, for example, they're hitting a sibling, instead of going on down this big rant of like, you're being such a bad boy or you're being such a bad girl, look at you hit your sister, you don't care about her, and you're putting all of these guilt, thank you, manipulation into their mind, which probably didn't even exist. They probably just hit because they were pissed off, like simple as that, and would have been over in 5 minutes. Now you've put this whole thinking in their mind, which is really your own projection of your own, like what you believe is right or wrong, versus just saying like, I don't want you to hit. Like if you're upset about something, you can let me know or let your sister know or your brother know, but I will not allow hitting. That's very just clear cut, and like they know what they can and cannot do without a crazy long explanation about how they're so bad. Same thing, like you were mentioning emotions, for example. So like in this field of, I guess you could say, mindful parenting, or mindfulness, there's this idea that it's called name it to tame it, which is this belief that if you actually label the emotion that's there, it actually brings that emotion back into balance, because you're actually naming it and you're like kind of setting it free in a way. Like you know what it is, and now you're not thinking like, what is this? Why am I feeling like this? Like you've named it. So for example, if a young child is feeling a lot of anger, instead of saying, why are you so angry? Because now you've made this child you've pretty much said to the child, you become your emotion. You are angry. You are sad. No, the child is a human that happens to be experiencing emotions. So using language such as, oh, I notice your anger is here. So with Yannick, that's what we'll do, right? Like his anger shows up quite often. And also giving him like a wide spectrum of emotions, like the language for a wide spectrum of emotions in both, but we try in both Punjabi and English. So like, frustration, sadness, loneliness, right? Like having a bigger vocabulary of different emotions that exist because of annoyance. And so I remember we were going to a party one time. It was someone's like Lordy party or something. And he's like lying on the floor like an hour into it. And he's like, मैं बहुत ही अक्के आया. That is amazing. You use that word perfectly.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Right? And like it fully explained. And if a mindful parent of me at that moment wasn't guilted into like society obligations, I would have heard him say that and would have been like, let's go. Mm-hmm. Right? Because in that moment, that is a place where I can take him out of and like help him, support him emotionally by coming into a place of like feeling more balanced again, right? Or if you can't leave, I mean, in that situation, I couldn't leave, then it's still supporting them in that situation, acknowledging, oh, like, ਤੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਤੇਰਾ ਹੁਣ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਅੰਦਰ ਅੱਕੇ ਆਇਆ right? ਤੈਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਪਤਾ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਅੱਕੇ ਅੰਦਰ, right? And he'll be like, okay, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਹਦਾ ਨੀਂਦ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਿਰ ਦੁਖਣ ਲੱਗ ਪਿਆ. That, and this was like, he's 5 now. This is probably like 2 years ago. So at 3, he was able to start to communicate like these
big emotions,
these emotions that he's feeling, right? And so like, now for example, I remember he started school in between like part-time, he used to go to Montessori, and like so tantrums around that, of course, as well. And so like, talking, like connecting with him, and like it's a fear of separation that comes out, right? Like at a young age, children have a lot of anxiety and fear of separation, and their brain, they don't understand that I'm leaving my parent now and I'll come back. They always think like, what if this is the end, right? Like there's no more seeing my parent after this, right? So that's the fear. So I remember like asking him like, oh, is your like tera dar aaya? And he's like, haan. And I'm like, how do you know that tera dar aaya? He's like, oh, my tiddi vich lagda jida kuch uddda aaya. Right? So butterflies.
I'm so shocked that he's so young and he's able to like
articulate that.
All this stuff. Yeah. That's really interesting, and it shows that the fact that you've just incorporated that vocabulary for him is why he can actually express that.
Right. Or having a safe space to feel like he can express it.
Right. I think we given space to talk about these things and allow, so he can start recognizing emotions now. Mm-hmm. So for when he gets bigger and stuff like hits the fan, like he's able to handle that in a different way.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, or like he'll say, mera, you know, we gussa, we say, you know, he said gurgur, right?
Yeah.
He goes, mera gurgur aaya. Nahi, dad, oh, mera gurgur thoda shota ho gaya. And then, so we talk about how do you know shota ho gaya?
Yeah.
What are you recognizing inside? What's happening? So physically, what's happening inside your body, and like mind space, how are you right now? So we have these conversations, try to have these sort of conversations with them. And I think that's really helpful. I think stories are another helpful way of teaching these kids of certain skill sets that we're trying to instill in them.
Like emotional regulation, right? Yeah. And like, I'm just gonna go back to that point you were saying, like, even just for example, like when talking about fear, like I remember when he was going to school, like having him understand the concept of bravery, right? Because bravery can only exist if fear exists, right? Without the absence of fear, there is no bravery. Without the absence of hate, there is no love. So it's, you need to understand one to understand the other, right? And so because he understands what fear is, okay, let's see what bravery looks like, right? How can you have bravery? Because even bravery, courage, kindness, these are all attributes in humans that need to be cultivated as well, right? You can cultivate fear. If we live in states of fear, if we live in environments of fear, we're just cultivating the fear. That's what we're doing, right? Similarly, if we can live in environments or in spaces of love and kindness and bravery, we're cultivating those pieces, making those pieces more stronger. So I remember like when he would go to school, like, and this is not a one-day thing. Like, sometimes we think like, that's the thing with kids is like, like, how they say, like, for the human mind, it really takes them about 22 years for them to become fully developed and aware of consequences and of like understanding how the world works, and to be fully developed into a human brain. We think at 2 years old, a child should right away get that concept of either this is bravery, this is an everyday thing, is what I find, right? Like even with Yannick, like I might talk about bravery today and 3 days again, it's going to come up again, right? So it's consistently feeding that little seed, like non-stop, so that it actually has time to get rooted and then sprout up, right? So like he might have fear going to Montessori and he might get over that fear, but that doesn't mean that fear might not come out in something else, right? And then now helping him walk through that process to help him understand, oh, this is a fear that came out in a different angle. And this is a fear that like is coming up around this situation, but like, how can we bring up bravery now, right? What does bravery look like? And so I remember like, for him, like he used to get, for like going to school, for example, like, okay, let's try to see if we can have brave come up. And I remember we tried to do different, like even mantras, like not Shabad related, but like more just to help ground his mind in something. And it's so great that like even nowadays children's programming has started to speak about these things. So like he was watching Llama Llama, this little kids cartoon, and they were talking about mantras and how mantra is something your mind can focus on, so that if you're feeling fearful, if it does a mantra, it helps you to make that fear get smaller, or it distracts you from the fear. So he remembered I told him about Llama Llama. So like when he would go to his Montessori school and he would be crying, I would be having this routine with him where like he would sit there and he would do his like, a mantra I made up for him, which is pretty much like, Yannick is brave, Vaheguru is with Yannick, Yannick is brave, Yannick has brave, Yannick's brave is here, and just playing around with like the words. Vaheguru will bring bravery in Yannick, right? And like helping him to use, and it would calm him down. I did find that helped a lot, and to the point like he even uses that now. Like last night, he had to go to the bathroom and I was too lazy to go with him. Because I was like in the bed and it was so comfortable. I'm like, Yannick, just go. And he's like, but I have like a nightmare. That's what he calls a nightmare. Nightmare, mama. Like, I'm a little bit scared. I'm like, okay, let's see if Brave can come. Otherwise, I'll go with you, right? So like, I like heard him running to the bathroom and he's like, Yannick's Brave is here. Vaigru's with Yannick. Vaigru's with Yannick. And he's like repeating this. And like, he's doing it like running to the bathroom. Can hear him going and then running right back. Right? Like, but Brave came.
That's so cute.
And then just encouraging him, like, look at that. Look at what it was like for Brave to show up. You did it all by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like such a, like maybe like a small little thing for us, but a mountain for them, right? And going back to what Randip was saying about stories, so there's this great article I came across. So there's this woman, and she was a scientist that she observed behaviors of humans, and so she was living on, this was like back in the 70s, and she happened to be living with a native tribe. For good like 20-30 years of her life she was there, just observing the culture, seeing how they do things differently. And so what she spoke about was emotion regulation, and the way like herself being a Westerner, she would find herself like, you know, frustrated with the culture, lashing out with them by like giving them the silent treatment at times, or like raising her voice. And she's like, what I noticed with them was they always had so much patience with her, even during those times. Or sometimes when they were feeling frustrated with her, she's like, they never give me a silent treatment. They never raised their voice on me. They were able to emotionally regulate themselves and then come and connect with me after. And she's like, I always wondered, like, I never see them talking to their kids about it. Like, how do their kids learn all of this? And so over time, what she witnessed was that, like, to teach children emotion and emotion regulation, the culture, the tribe used to tell a lot of oral stories, right? And so what she learned and what her research is around is that children are built to learn from oral stories, and to help build emotion regulation into them. And if you really want to teach them like a concept, or you really want to teach them something, tell them a story, but tell it to them beforehand, right? And like you repeat that story over and over so they really understand what the value of that story is, what it's trying to teach. Because what will end up happening is that when that emotion actually arises because they're in a conflict or disagreement, that story will come into play in their mind. And so they will know how to regulate themselves based on the story that they've heard in the past. Randip was like making up little stories on his, like, randomly. He would wake up one day, like wake up and he'd be like, Yannick, I have a story for you. I remember he had a story about like this kid who lost a doll, and then eventually he found the doll. But anyways, one of the things that came out of it was patience, right? Like the concept of patience. And I remember like a week later, Yannick was like working on like trying to stack his toys, and they kept on falling and like he was getting frustrated. And normally he's the type, if he gets frustrated with those type of things, he will have a tantrum. But I remember all of it, this was like a moment in time, he pauses and he's like, patience. And I'm like quietly watching him. He's like, Dado says patience. And I'm like, wow. Oh my goodness, like look at the connection a week later that came, right? That was pretty cool. Like,
to see. In other aspects too, I find it pretty interesting. Like, you know, like we'll be working out. Like in the evenings, I try to work out, and then he's around, and then I generally, it's just, you know, my mindset, like, you don't stop. Like, you work out, you do that extra rep till you can't go, till your body collapses, you don't stop, right? So he's seeing that, and I talked to him about that. I'm like, Yannick, we don't give up. We don't stop. Like this, we keep going. And
try again.
Let's go. Like, we talk like that. We have these conversations. And I see it in him. Like, I'm starting to, like, he's turning 5 now. I'm starting to see it in him. And so we were gone to this hike, and he doesn't like wearing shoes a lot, right? So he likes to be like bare feet, run around. So he took shoes off, and then there's like these road, and so we're running through like this nature place, and then the road came, and then I'm like, yeah, Janak shoe pala, like, you know what I mean? He's like, He's like, no, Dad. He goes, and he's saying, ow, right? It hurts. I'm like, yo, tu shoe pala koi nahi. I got my shoes on. No, tu shoe pala. He's like, no. He's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do. Just like to have that mindset.
Yeah.
It's not like, no, I'm not going to give up. It's not much. I'm going to try it. I'm going to do it and see what happens. And then I encourage him too. I'm like, Tika, you try it. And let's see. If you need your shoes are here. Like you could do it too. But if you want to do it, go for it. Yeah. And then he did it. And then he accomplished it. And then that accomplishment for him, I think, was huge.
Yeah.
It's these little battles these guys start winning at these young ages that make them into confident beings later on, I think.
And I think what you're like touching on there, which is like a whole different also like, you know, topic you can go to so much, like, is like, it's okay to make mistakes or it's okay to change your mind, right? So I might start off like not wanting to wear my shoes and I really honestly want to try walking barefoot. Give me the option to do that. But in case I can't, like, don't hold me now, like pin me to this moment of, see, I told you to put your shoes on before. Why did you not listen to me then? Instead, oh, okay, you're ready to wear your shoes. Here they are. That's it. Short and simple. Yeah. So it allows them to know that, you know, if I want to try something, I'm not going to be held against a standard of having to achieve something or show that I won't fail. Right? That I can still like struggle and, you know, I might come back for support and maybe all I need is just that, okay, here you go, Yannick, and I might change my mind again. No, actually, let me try again. Right? But the fact that I have that available to me, right? And like, if, you know, I want to walk barefoot up that hill and I say like, halfway I want to put my shoes on, that I'm not going to hear, well, see, I told you should have worn them, wasn't I? And now that becomes a whole conversation, and in his little mind he's being taught like, I don't make the right choices, I should always listen to what's being told.
The self-doubt kicks in for them as well.
I have a question. Like, whoa, that was like, okay, I really need to ask this question because a lot of our parents have so much expectations of us, right? So many. And so many parents have actually reached out to me throughout these COVID times, especially. They're like, Sade bache are going on that side, or at the jare, like they're exploring, right?
Yeah.
So, like when you have those expectations as parents, and your child just goes totally opposite of that, how would you approach that?
I think you shouldn't have those type of expectations. I think we should be taught not to have those type of expectations in terms of like, why are we putting that pressure on ourselves, even as parents, right? Like, I don't want Yannick to be perfect. I want him to be able to know how to make mistakes. I don't want to be perfect. And so one of the things, like, you know, like, just to kind of like touch on that is like, if I do something wrong, I'll tell Yannick I did that wrong. Right? Like, oh, Yannick, I made a mistake there. Or if I raise my voice, like, just because I'm trying mindful parenting, I'm not hitting it out of the ballpark every single time. I'm falling many, many times, right?
He'll say it to us too.
He'll say it. Like, your voice is high right now. I think you need to go find your saw.
He goes, Mama, you need to find your saw. Dado, why, Dado, you're angry? Why is your anger here?
Yeah.
So he'll say stuff like that to us.
Yeah. Like, he's parenting you guys.
Then you check in with yourself. Like,
But you have to be willing to check in with yourself. I think that's the secret. Because at that moment when you're frustrated, it's really easy to also say, Tenu ki pata. Right? Mera baap marna pe. Like, you know, that's how our parents would say it. But like, to have that ability to say you are absolutely 110% right, that I am right now struggling. I am really finding myself falling here, and I know you're just trying to help guide me. And so instead of me being stubborn, let me go find my saw. Let me go check in with myself. You go do something for the moment. Let me see, where is this frustration really coming from? Where is this anger coming from? What can I do to like make it smaller? And then come back and like connect with you in a different way.
And I think that teaches them confidence as well, because their opinion is valued.
Yeah,
at such a high level, where it's generally not valued.
Everybody in the house is equal at this point. That's the thing. There's no authority, and I think naturally as adults, even as parents, you naturally are like, I am the authority figure. Because I'm older, I have more experience. But to bring yourself back,
there are certain places you have to have your authority.
Yeah,
more around safety
issues and danger. Yeah, but once that child starts exploring, if we look like attachment theory, for example, attachment theory says that there's different types of attachments, right? So if you have a secure attachment, that means when that child was crying, you picked up that child. When that child needed anything, you tended to that need. You tended to that need. As that child starts growing older, right? That child you as a parent could sort of start a little bit stepping back in certain times, and then that child will go further and explore and take risks because that child knows, oh, I'm going to be safe because my primary attachment piece is still going to be there.
Yeah.
Hence mother or father in this case, right? Sometimes mother or father aren't around, depends who's around. So for Yannick, it's like he's taking certain chances that maybe he would not, because he knows even if he fails at it, oh, my mom and dad are always going to be there for me.
Yeah.
So he's exploring at a different capacity. And then I think as he gets older, and that's on us too, to sort of start pulling back as, and then obviously when he becomes like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, like, once they get to that age, like, okay, you're fully pulled back and you're talking to a fully developed human now, and they know how to make their decisions. And before they get to that, that whole 16 to that age, you got to set your boundaries around that time too, right? But that's that attachment piece. And there's ambivalent attachment when there's attachment like, they weren't picked up. They weren't. Sometimes they were. There's how many 4 different types of attachments? Sometimes they were picked up. Sometimes they weren't picked up.
Because maybe, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's because the parent was at fault. It could be mental health reasons, right? Like maybe the parent is struggling with depression, mental health. They're just not tuned into their child, right? So it's very easy to say like, oh, I would always pick up my child. Like what kind of negligent parent is that?
Sometimes you just gotta work, man.
Sometimes you're like, it's not to the fault of that parent. I think it's also the way society, especially like the society we're currently living in, a very capitalistic type of society that forces us to grind, like that whole 9 to 5, sometimes even more, depending on what your situation is. Like new immigrant family, you don't have the option to be there with your child, and your child is essentially raising themselves or with other strangers, right? It's not because of that parent's at fault. That was what came out of their life situation, right? So you can't even blame the parent to be like, oh, you were a bad parent.
They need their own therapy, man.
They need their own therapy, right? And so like
true,
and so parents for like who feel like I'm not reaching certain expectations, as you were saying, I think it's because they have so much stress on their own shoulders of the expectations they need to meet out of life, right? Because, are you being the perfect dad? Are you being the perfect mom? Are you like, being the perfect, pretty much everything. This word perfection, I think, causes more harm than it causes greatness, because in perfection you're not allowed to make mistakes. In perfection you're not allowed to ask for support.
You don't take chances, you don't risk, you're afraid of failure. All that stuff starts coming up then,
right? And like when you have that much perfection in your mind, and now you're passing that type of perfection onto your child, that child starts to learn, I cannot act. You'll get 2 types, I think. Either you'll get then the child that will listen to you fully in everything, and they become your shadow. They forget to be who they are, and they become your shadow. They become the parent's shadow. And they will do everything and anything, even as an adult, to please that parent. Or then you'll have the other side of that other child who has that, strong fire of rebellion. And they'll go the opposite direction. I want to do nothing of how my parent is like. I don't want to, if it's coming from a place of, for example, religion, it might be, I want nothing to do with this religion anymore. If it's coming from a place of like, a certain type of culture, I want nothing to do with this culture anymore, right? And so like setting such high expectations, for yourself and therefore for your child will result in extremes, right? It doesn't allow for that, I think, balance pathway. And I think everything, that's the thing. Like, I remember reading this like quote, like the worst things in life occurred because of like people's insecurities. Like, there's a quote around that. I know I'm totally butchering that, but it pretty much means like, even if you take, I think like a parent and a young child and like, trying to gently, in a love way, put that child into a path of like falling in love with Sikhi, teaching these stories around connection and like humanity and like, connecting the mind to Shabad, but it's done in a very loving and, you made a mistake, it's okay, get back up. I think that's a very flourishing way to be, raised. But I think like where you have like where the parent's own fear is that if my child, for example, doesn't do their bot, they're going to hell. Okay, the thought is driven in that like idea of if my child does not do X, the outcome is a fearful outcome, which is they're going to be doomed for eternity, say, right? The parent has the right intention, is just unfolding in a very negative way now, because through that you're going to force your child, you know, to do, it's going to come out in a very forceful way. It's not going to come out in a very, you know, gentle and kind way. It's going to come in a way of like, didn't I tell you that you're not supposed to be watching any TV? Did I not tell you? Versus like, oh, you notice your child watching TV? Fine. Perhaps you want them to do like Barney. It means gently take, like, you know, inserting yourself in there, respecting them, saying like, oh, you know, once you're done this cartoon, I want to do something really fun with you, or I want to like show you something. And then you do it together with them, right? Like, you take their hand, you sit down, and you read them a sakhi together. And now you're building connection, right? And in that sakhi, maybe you do 2 minutes of like a shabad, right? That's very different than if a child is watching cartoons and they're 6-7 years old and their parent comes, I think, barging in and is like, "Kini bhai kya TV dekhta rehanda hai aur dekhti rehndi hai, paath to nahi karna nahi kade."
Yeah, I really like that you said that, doing it with them. Because that's one thing that I also, like, because we teach Gurmukhi and we have a lot of parents coming to us, they'll say things like, oh, path nahi karde. And I'm like, but you have to do it with them. You can't just say path kar and then you're not doing it yourself. Like, jaisi sangat, taisi rangat. Like, you are what your kid will become.
Oh, hands down.
Right?
So then how do you guys incorporate Sikhi into like your parenting? Like, I remember I was on a Zoom meeting with Randip Ji, and Randip like, "Hamani karo," and then Jara Singh completed it.
Like, I'm pretty sure we struggle with this piece a lot. So I don't think we could be like role models or, you know, whatever you want to say. I think like the little moments where we try to do it is, for example, I'll speak to myself and then Randip can speak about himself of how he tries to do it, is like, if I notice, for example, his anger is here, right? Physically picking him up, first of all, and taking him into a more quiet space, right? And he's now become used to this system. Like, his mind has built a habit out of this to the point where even if he's crying and like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, he's older now. Like, he'll stop crying. He'll say, I need my space in his crying. Or what he'll say is like, help me find my saw, is what he'll say, right? Because he's recognized in his own little self, like, something's, I'm emotionally off. So then I pick him up, I take him, you know, we have a rocking chair that we sit on, and this has become a routine, is to help him find his saw means to do either a shabad or to do Vaheguru Simran, right? And like, you know, in a very just soothing way, like as he's crying, I'm just, and like sometimes like, and he'll say like, Halle mera sani mar ke aaya, right? And so you continue it. But somehow in his mind, he's seen that as more of a comforting thing, so that like, in order to bring my emotion back on, I need to go to Shabad or like doing Gurmantar. And that I think like is very comforting for him in that piece. Like, that's he says that's my mantra. But so that's one small way. And another one is like, and I could definitely be 10 times better in this, is using like the right sakhiyan. Like, so first of all, knowing the sakhiyan myself, and like, you know, that sakhi of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and how langar started, and that actually became like so ingrained in his mind that he constantly refers to that, having more sakhiyan available that are easy to understand, because not all sakhiyan can be understood at certain ages, right? There's some sakhiyan that, like, for example, the sap sakhi, like, he loves that sakhi, right? Like, I remember when he was like younger, he'd want to hear like, oh, like, he loves animals, so he wants to hear any sakhi that might have an animal in there, right? Guru Har Gobind Ji and the court, where like the Singh who went to go get Guru Gobind Singh Ji's court. Yeah. So he wants to hear those type of, like, he finds them either amusing or like, obviously there's a lesson to be learned in there. But also, yeah, using sakhiyan as a way to teach something that, like, I don't want to give him a lecture on, because I think lecturing is the worst thing. Like, you tune out. I tune out of my own parents' lectures right now. And I'm like 40 years old. How am I going to expect like a 6-year-old or like a 4-year-old to listen to what I have to say? Versus stories, they're so enticing. They're so fun. And if there's that moral built into it, like, your work is done for you. So I think
like even with stories, especially because every story has like a lesson.
Yeah.
Then you're like, oh, like those Sikhs from like Guru Sahib's time were struggling the same way I am.
Yeah,
like we're the same.
That's exactly
then
it.
that really helps. Like I'm like, oh, it's not just me who's dealing with this. Like those amazing Guru Sikhs that I look up to, they were dealing with this too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like even I find that sometimes if I'm really like challenged in life about something or where I am, like I try to like, in the few amount of sakhiyan that I know, like turn to, and I find they help. Like, you know, there's like, you know, perfection. Like I remember like, or like not like making mistakes or like perfection. Like I remember there was a sakhi of like, by Menga, right? Who like, and I feel like the great lesson to be learned, you know, I feel like myself, I struggle with this, like, oh, I should know Sakhi right away, I should be perfect in it. Versus like Sakhiyan like that teach you, get up and try again. You fail, get up and try again. You fail, get up and try again, right? Like, you don't stop trying no matter how many times you fall and you rugger yourself in, right? And like, I feel like even like, you know, there's a sakhi about like Sorna and Mona. So they're like, they were two, there was a couple, they were going to go give pani to like some Devti puja, and like a Sikh who was wounded happened to come in their way, asked them for water, and they say, no, we can't give it, because it has to be pure. Like, we're gonna go chadai, right? And like the 6 bachans were like, thanu ta kade thada guru nahi thanu kade miluga, right? And they were so like, and so like they happened to cross, they weren't walking past, heard Guru Gobind Singh Ji is coming, and they're like, oh, see Guru Sahib de darshan karne hai. But like every mode they would get to, Guru Sahib had already passed by, right? And then finally they went to like Guru Sahib's like mahal, where they used to live, and they're like, asi darshan karna hai, and they got the response back like, thanu guru de darshan nahi ho gaye. Imagine, like, if I was that person, oh my God, life's over, right? Like, you know, like, forget about what my parents want, what my kids want. My own guru is saying, I'm not giving you my darshan. You have 2 choices then. Either you completely, like, let yourself, like, you fall completely and that's it. Like, you end yourself there, or you keep trying. And I think so like, they were like, okay, Tika Guru Sahib de darshan nahi ho gaye, but can we do seva of Guru Sahib? Yes, you can, right? And like, they started living in the mahal, and they started like, you know, their job was to be in the bagicha and make sure all of the flowers were like well arranged, and all the flower seva would go to Guru Sahib, right? And like, the lesson I find, like, anytime I feel like I'm not hitting perfection, is that like, even if your guru says to you like, thanu darshan nahi honge, can you still get up and still try?
Right.
Right? Like, not that I need to reach perfection myself, right? But even in that moment of like lowness, like, please let me have the strength to be at least like, let me try, right? Like, die in trying. Randip always says like that, right? Like, die in trying. Like, you know, it's okay, make mistakes, but try again.
Live in uddam.
Yeah.
Live and try.
Right? Like, and so I think like, yeah, in all, like, yeah, like, you know, for myself and with Yannick, like, no, I don't want this expectation of perfection from me. I want you to keep trying, and you will fall. And I hope you see us falling too, because then you will see how we're trying to get back up. Right? Because if you never see, even in the sakhiyan, if we never saw role models who learned how to get back up, then how would we know how to get back up? Right? Like, we need those sakhiyan, we need humans around us that are falling, but then get back up again. Right? And we can never say, like, even when we are at a place where we're flowing great, like, this is it, because, you know, there that line by Liz Baba Fariji Kubiji Haleta, like, the sip is still in the ocean. Right? Like, you might think, oh, my child's done. You don't know what's still coming, or you might think my child's perfect. You still don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
And that even comes to like the idea of like judging other parents or judging yourself. It's like, well, you don't know what's gonna come for you, right? So it's like you gotta keep going, be like, do the ardas to Guru Sahib, like at least thank you for this day.
Yeah.
Right? And then whatever you throw at me, just let me have that dedication and motivation that you taught me through those sakhiyan to just keep going.
That's it.
You know what would be pretty cool if we make you know how we made all those videos for Yannick? Like how he grew up and we like recorded all these different things. If we made videos of our own,
I'm struggles. I thought that was great.
Yannick, so this is the situation. This is happening in my life right now. I'm struggling with this. And I'll tell you, I overcome it.
Yeah.
If it's a week struggle or if it's a year struggle. Okay, so Yannick, so this whole year I've been going through this and this is what I did and this is how I overcame it.
That's it.
That'd be pretty cool.
There's this TV show, Good Luck Charlie. I don't know if you guys know it. But she's this older sister and she pretty much makes like video diaries to her like toddler sister every day. And she tells her sister like, this is the problems I went through. This is how I dealt with it. And sometimes it's a month problem. Sometimes it's a year, whatever it is. And then it's kind of like sending that, okay, when you're older enough, you're going to watch all these diaries and you're going to see how I dealt with it.
That's wicked.
That's super sick. Yeah.
Because there's so many lessons to be learned in there, right?
Yeah.
And I think like, I remember being a kid and then I became an adult. I'm like, you guys totally don't have it together. When I saw my parents at like my 30s. But like when you're small, your parents, you feel like have everything together. They have the answers because that's how they show you, right? They don't show you like, I make mistakes or I fall. And so therefore you think only I'm making mistakes. Only I'm falling. Versus if Yannick gets to see like the struggles of paying a mortgage, but what is more important, right? Like do you want to like, this is what we like, for example, like our struggle is like should we live in like a condo but pursue something that we're really passionate about, or like live in a house and like have a mortgage, and now you're stuck in this capitalistic mind of like trying to attain in this physical world because your mind wants that physical security. Or what if you let that fear go and you live in something smaller but on the side, or your life can then also become
fulfilled,
what you're fully wanting to pursue. And that's like whatever path you choose, what's the outcome of it, right? Like do you, and maybe in the path where you pursue your passion, like you'll fall, but at least you'll fall knowing you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right? And like I feel like that's what I would want Yannick to take out, is don't live in fear. Right? Like even like the society we've built in the world right now, it's built around fear, right? It's built around like long-term physical goals and gains, right? Like what if in retirement I am struggling, or what if and like I feel like, I'm gonna waste my entire youth, my own Giovanni, in fears. Who knows how the future is gonna turn out? Trying to achieve that versus like really living a life of I'm taking care of my health, I'm taking care of my mind, and somehow I can combine that in a way where I can also connect it to community, right? And like have Yannick learn from that as well. Okay, like and later on in life you will fall. Like the only thing I pray is you don't get stuck in that loop in your mind of like anxiety or you know what I mean? Like if you hit rock bottom, get back and try again. Like don't get stuck of hitting the loop and like life is over now type of thing, right?
And I think that's where like we won't talk about the different school models and what we think of Montessori versus Waldorf versus Forest School. But I think that's where nature school really plays, for me, it plays a big role in Yannick's upbringing, especially at this age, that it provides him with so much and such a deep connection with nature. I think it's healing as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think he will learn even later in life how to turn towards nature and utilize it for his own benefit, for his own personal growth.
Like trying to embed it now so it becomes second nature later on, right?
Yeah.
And also I mean, we don't have time right now, but like even looking at the pressures of academics, on young people, like I feel like learning should be like, the pursuit of learning should be done for the enjoyment for that pursuit of learning, right? Like, if someone is really interested in math, you should genuinely pursue that because you're fully interested in it, not because you think like, I'm gonna get an A in this, or like, this is what my parents want me to be, like becoming like, a doctor or an engineer. This is the road I need to head down. I'm in competition with someone, or like, this is where, if I can really,
like your self-worth is coming from your grades.
It's becoming from your grades. And the reason for that is because down the road, I will get the job that will pay for the house and pay for the luxury that I need, because that's what's most important. Versus you are truly learning whatever subject you're learning for the enjoyment of learning. And then you're learning it because if you are given that natural gift of either being, great in math or great in science or a great athlete, how can you use that natural given ability to give back in a different way? Not that like it becomes like, this is my own, like, this is something I need to keep secret and I need to use it only for myself or my own immediate family. And like, you never, because I think that burns a soul and a human out. Like, if you limit your natural abilities to just accumulating wealth or like that A, or like the feeling pressure to go into a program because you have to, in the long run, like, a person I feel like will burn out because there's no inner joy that's pushing that spirit forth. But I see why parents push it, especially parents who are like coming from different countries, because if you look at Maslow's, for example, hierarchy, at the end of the day, the basic human needs of like food, shelter, connection are inbuilt in all humans, right? It's like, it's just, that's Kudrat has put it in us to make sure we survive.
Yeah, he talks about that being his primary before you even get to the self piece.
Yes, like that's like the basic need that you need to have, right? So parents who are immigrating and leaving, really bad situations in their own countries, war-torn countries, what's happening in Punjab right now, those parents are trying to meet their basic need, right? And so when they come here, they're not thinking about, ideas of self-actualization. How am I going to like pursue my passion? Am I doing something I'm interested in? Their really whole idea is like, do I have a shelter over my head? And can I provide food for my family?
It's such a privilege.
It's such a privilege to have,
privilege.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate Sikh in your...
Oh, yeah. We might have to like kind of put together this.
We can talk about that some other time.
No, I mean like...
I don't know. How do I incorporate Sikhi? I really don't, man. I live my life. I just live my life.
That's exactly, every time we ask about like Sikhi things, they're like, I don't know. I just do it. Okay, it's kind of like, it just happens.
No, like, I honestly, like, we sleep with Bonnie on all the time. Anytime you go, like, where we, like, it's always on.
Yeah.
I drive around with it. I talk to him. So I encourage him in certain things. Like, I push him in certain ways. I push certain buttons in him that I think will bring certain qualities out in him later on in life. So, like, that whole not giving up piece, I do it in very tricky ways with him, right? And I make sure that he doesn't give up at certain times in his life. I put seeds of certain stories in him where he's like, okay, you know what? Okay, this is, I gotta develop this skill. I gotta develop patience. I gotta develop like encouragement. Okay, what's the practice? Okay, man jehda a, inu fe apa kidda sunna bani nu kidda sunida a. So I talk to him about little things like that. Like, Jenna, okay, ek wari hona apa karna, bas ek wari karna, tu apni awaaz na Waheguru keh tenu sunda. Tenu sachi sunda. I don't believe you, man. Show me again. Like, can you really do it? So I just talk to him. I play with him like that. And then he's like, no, Dad, look, I can do it. I'm like, okay, hon tu chup ho ja. Kuch jeev na nahi bolna. Hon tu bol. Tenu apne andar jehda tera man hai, wo na bol. Tenu Waheguru sunda. He's like, Dad, I did it. So I'm like, oh, theek hai, main to nahi hunda. I'm going to try to, Janak, main bhi karunga. So, I just play with him.
You gotta play it.
I just play with him like that.
You have to make it so much fun.
Like, it's daily. This is how I talk to him. These are my conversations with him.
And they have like legit questions. Like, Janik will like be like, man. I don't see how just saying Waheguru is going to help me realize Waheguru inside.
Wow.
Like, Then how do you answer that?
Kids ask super deep questions, and sometimes we don't
have the answer.
I don't know. I don't know all the answers. Mama doesn't know all the answers. So when you grow up, maybe you might know the answer, and then you can tell us because we really don't know it right now.
Or he'll be like, well, if Vaiguru has no hands and no feet and no body, then how did they create everything with hands and feet and body? How did it happen?
You got to realize it's a 5-year-old brain.
Yeah.
So they're in concrete mind right now. So anything is physical. They don't understand abstract yet. We can't tell them, socha na hove. You could tell them the akari artha, but you can't tell them the Bhagat Ji. Like you can't tell them, bhai, Maharaja pyar, love the soch nahi hunda kinna dunga Maharaja pyar. You can't. Bhagat Ji artha. You can't tell them these abstract things yet. But once I think, what is that? After 7, maybe.
Yeah, after 7, abstract starts coming in.
They start like slowly. So then we'll start at that at age 7. So you got to flow with them at their level.
Because right now he just understands. I wonder what his version of Vaiguru is in his mind. Because we try to make it like not be a person, but like a universal source that exists within everything, right? So I think that's why he's like, but if it's in everything, but then it has no body, how did it make all of these things that have a body, right? And because in his mind it's very concrete, like you have a body, I have a body, everything must have a body. So how do you explain something
like how
that's existence? Right?
How would you explain that? Like it's like what? Vibration it's difficult to explain to a brain like that.
Or then like sometimes he'll be like, because it'll be like, Barney says if you do like Vaiguru inside with your like, Simran or Barney, then eventually you can like feel Vaiguru inside you, right? So he'll be like, but I don't understand what that means. I'm like, okay, for example, like the wind, can you see the wind? All right? And he'll be like, no, but I'm like, can you feel the wind? And I'm like, only you know what the wind feels like on your skin. So only you will know what Vaiguru feels like for you, right? So you gotta like
so sick.
Get a concrete thing in the world he does understand. He understands wind. He understands he can't see it, but he can feel it. And now somehow make that connection to hopefully that. And maybe he'll get it and maybe he won't, but at least you tried in a different way.
What's awesome though? Like Guru Sahib knew that we wouldn't be able to get what they're talking about, so they use bare metaphors in Gurbani. And they use like a fish all the time about water, and like when you get it, and I'm like, oh, that's what that means. Like you don't really understand it, but they use metaphors for us because they're like, you're not gonna get it. I have to explain it to stuff you're gonna see.
It's where their child like that can't understand anything but
yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
So, I think so. My whole thing is to plant these guns in them of certain guns that I want, and the whole is I don't even talk much about the whole, like I just talk about the whole I want him to be able to understand his mind and deal with his mind and understand how to focus and how to take like get towards the shabada and start utilizing that inside, and how to something happened and your mind is running, okay, how are we going to bring it back? How are we going to stop it now? Like I try to teach him from that lens, Sikhi. And then I think as he meets Sangat, as he comes out and he meets Sangat, they're going to teach him like that. I don't think I even need to do any of that. Like they're going to teach him like Sakhiyan. I do the Prab knows way more history than me. She will do some of that stuff. That it'll be like, they'll teach him, okay, this is right, this is this is that. Like he sees me what I do, but then I don't know what his is going to be because he's probably going to be very different from me in his own practice as Sikhi, right? So, but then he'll learn that. Like if he meets you guys, if he meets like other kids that are probably like 10 years old, he's probably going to look up to those kids like, I should learn. Like, I don't know. I don't know what he's going to become. So, but I think, if it takes a village, when we talk about sometimes, it takes a community. I want to put him in that community when COVID opens up. So go. Like, this you don't need, like, this is me, but go learn from these guys. Like, I want him, like, Moni Kaur, I put Yannick in her class. I'm like, tu sakha, like, because it's going to be different coming from you. He's going to learn a different aspect from you, right? So I think it's going to, I don't know. I'd put him in a lot of different places that he could gain knowledge. I would go with him, like, to, where do they teach the best Kirtan? Was it like Jodhi Taksal? I would go with him when he's of age. I'll stay with him for a year or 6 months. I'll be like, Janaka, let's go. and we'll take time off and we'll like, okay, let's learn. You want to learn Kirtan? Let's go. You want to learn like jiu-jitsu? All right, well, who's the best jiu-jitsu teacher around? Okay, can we take 6 months? Prob, you got the 4 for 6 months. Me and Jen are gonna go away for a bit, and we're gonna learn jiu-jitsu, or we could incorporate into it. I imagine myself doing stuff like that. Oh, you want to learn something? Oh, Bhagat Ji still, you know what I mean? He's still in the body. He hasn't decided to leave yet. Let's go see him before he decides, right? To make a move and come
Take
again.
me on these adventures too. That's what I'm thinking, yo. Right?
So
all the stuff I want to do.
Like in the winters, we're not here, man. We're not here. Like we go to like Southeast Asia usually, man. We're like sitting in Thailand somewhere Malaysia, somewhere in Lombok or somewhere. And we just try to chill out. I don't like winter, man.
Good thing you moved to Canada.
I know.
I know.
But
the Sangat here is gold.
You can't touch the Sangat here.
Yeah.
We tried.
Or human rights. Not if you're like from maybe a native community, but Canadian like Punjabis.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, but it's really, I don't know. That's the type of stuff I see myself trying to do with him, right? If he's into it. And if he's into something else, like, okay, well, who's the best of the best in that? Can we find a teacher that's going to be able to train you in some of that? And the reason I would go to some of these places is until he's of age, like some of these places where, they train him, like even if he's going to be something or translations or anything, it's because I want to be there because I don't trust a lot. Like, when you go to sanstas, you don't know who's who, right? So you need that protection too, because I've had opportunity to meet a lot of corrupt people within Sikhi. So then, and a lot of beautiful people within Sikhi, right? So just being in that, and that's okay. It's all good, right? But jithon guna milda, let's go get that guna. And then you can have that guna, right? And then you can move. If it's something he really wants, that's how I would see myself doing it. Yeah. But what I want to instill in from my lens, even if he wants it or not, is the ability to dive into Shabad. Those aspects, like how do you put your concentration in the Shabad, and we try to do that like every time we get a chance, like just like here a minute here, 30 like a 5-second hit here, and just so, and then he gets older, I think he'll learn this is how you control your mind. This is what Guru Sahib Ji talks about when he says about man vedda rokana, hai like, and we'll point it out to him and we'll experiment, like, okay, Yannick, like, you know what I mean, like, okay, let's put our senses externally, like now like he's a little bit older, okay, look at all this stuff that's going on, you put that stuff in your mind for 2-3 days, okay, you see how you feel, okay, now I'm going to take you somewhere else for 2-3 days, now we're going to go sit in a smagam for 2-3 days, and now let's see the difference that's going to happen in your mind. Okay, how does that make you feel? You can write that down. How did this happen? And now where's your mind? Is your mind running? Can you control your mind a little bit easier? Can you bring it back? Can you bring the thought back? And I don't know, these types of experiments I'll probably do with them. I do it myself, so.
Because he's our guinea pig, right? Totally not the mindful bear. But and I think for any parent who like perhaps wants to do all of these things, but other obligations in life don't allow it, like there's so many other, like, know one that you're trying your best. Right? I think like all parents should know that.
Because that's not realistic what I'm saying either.
Right? Like for some families, they like, no. And even
in the sense that, who's going to take off for 6 months?
Maybe you could, but some people can. They might think like maybe we're not being good enough parents.
That's not true.
That's not true, right? So that means still like you can do all of that, but you could do it locally. The only thing is, are you there walking the path with your child? That's the most important thing, right?
That's it.
You are there going into the class, like not going like Tika, obviously kids need independence as well, but like are you there to connect with them and be like, oh, let's go take a walk today,
man, they're going to be the individical people.
Take them on a hike. Like
children are all about presence.
But that's what they're about. Connection.
100% they're about presence. It's about role modeling, right? It's not what you say, it's what you do.
That's
man.
it.
If they see what you do, they're gonna mimic you. That's what children do, right? And like you said, it's about presence.
100%.
I can't stress that enough, man. And I'm totally guilty of this. Like, you're on your phone. Janak, we try to talk to him on my phone. that's the wrong thing to do. Parents, that's the wrong thing to do. You're talking to someone. Your mind is gone somewhere else. No, bring your attention to your child, man. They're trying to talk to you. They're asking you questions. You need to be present for them. You're teaching them what presence is, right?
Yeah, so true.
And then they'll understand how to be present themselves. So, and I think it's not only these conversations. I think there's a lot of energy exchanges that happen. I think we are beings that a lot of our communication is not done verbally or non-verbal communication. I think it's really done at an energy basis. And I think that children are very sensitive at such a tender age that they're so young. They're such clean, beautiful, just fresh souls. Like, not fresh, I mean, soul generational, but you know what I mean? They come into this body, and now the amount of effect you can have on that.
And immediately with children too. Like there's so many psychological studies and tests done of kids who, if you take them out of homelessness or foster families, within that like age 0 to 5, you can change the whole like personality of them. Like, right? Because you just, what do? You take them, you give them love, and they're like, okay, I got it. There's love, right? And if you're present with them, like the moment you give that to them, you can like you can literally measure the brain waves, and you can see the actual change in the child the moment they have a present person there.
There's a correlation between fear and gray matter. The more gray matter that you have, the less fear that you have.
And you can quite literally strengthen and build that.
Yeah, like,
that's what's cool.
Now you imagine you throw
Barney into or like even the understanding of Barney around fear, right? Like Barney talks about that too. Like
you take shovels on fear.
Like
you drop of that,
and that's a real like that's not just like
that's 2 panktiyan jap. Baba used to do.
Oh, is it?
Those are panktiyan jap. You take 2 panktiyan.
Yeah, there's a reason he does that, man. Like it works
because it cultivates that state of whatever that Shabad is. I think trying to like in my knowledge, understanding basic is that like, you know, if you're like when Barney talks about being in a state of fearlessness, I think that's an actual state. It's not just a wild random concept because fear is within everyone, but once that fear is controlled to such a degree that your mind does not release one thought around being fearful, now you are in a state of being fearless, right? But you have to develop that state. It doesn't just naturally, it doesn't happen.
Remember you were saying you take the power away from the individual. You know, Baba by Money Singh Ji is about to get cut piece by piece.
Oh, that
like saying no, I'm not here.
Because like
not here, starting here. Yeah.
Like we were having this conversation. We were like how like like a lot of what Sakhiyan show us is like a lot of the Sikhs of that time, they went opposite to whatever like normal human behavior is, right? So when a normal human behavior is if you're being threatened, right? Like if someone's coming to you and saying like, I'm going to chop off your arm, your thing is like, no, please just kill me, or like, please spare me. Like you want it either done as painlessly as possible or to be forgiven and to be like, let go, right? But imagine you have someone who like Money Singh, who's saying like, forget the like wrist. I want you to start at the finger. Imagine where that mind must be in terms of pain tolerance. If you're talking about scientific, like using pain tolerance, fear, all of those pieces, because that mind is so connected with the Shabad.
And what it does to the other individual.
And now what it does to the other individual who's doing their torturing to hear, whoa, wait, what? Like, you've just made this harder on me, right?
Yeah.
Like, it shakes a person up, right? Like, if you're that torturer and you're hearing, like, I don't want you to start at the wrist and I want you to start at that, like, little finger. You're gonna
what kind of person is this?
Like, what kind of that's exactly what you're gonna think. Like, what kind of human being is this?
I think that, like, one of the biggest things I think I took away, I think you can say what you took away too, is that realizing that, even like a child is on its own journey as well. Yeah. And recognizing yourself and where you are in that moment, where that child is in that moment, and working together like that. If we're talking about parenting in Sikhi, right? Ovi Maharaji Jota, you guys are Maharaji Jota. We're all just here supporting each other, trying to figure out our way and our path, and just doing it together. Like Maharaj made this kid so we can learn from each other. I think that's recognizing that, like with your guys' parenting, I really took in the fact that you guys are recognizing your own downfalls and up, and helping your child explore that as well.
Yeah.
While you're learning yourself as well.
Yeah.
One thing I really learned from what you guys were saying too is that this takes a lot of Gareebi to be able to say, I'm not going to be like, the kid is at fault, because that's your hankar, right? It's like, oh, he's the one who did the fault. No, it's like, I did the one. I need to focus on myself. It's like bringing yourself down, not in the sense of bringing yourself down and self-loathing, right? But bringing yourself down in Gareebi and being like, okay, I need to focus on myself. And then again, what you said, like Guru Sahib's constantly telling us that we're children. Gurdev Mata, Gurdev Pita, Gurdev Swami Parmeswara, right? To be the child, you can only do that by doing Sangat of children. And I always, one thing that no matter what I've said in my life, it's like, one thing that you should always do Sangat of kids. Because you will learn everything about Gareebi from them. You will learn about innocence from them. You will learn about forgiveness from them. They're your teachers, to be honest.
That's so true.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, plus Guru Sahib is constantly telling us, you're a child, you're a child. I'm like, so that's the whole Gareebi mindset, which is what Bhagat Ji is constantly telling us.
They're always
like,
with children.
Yeah.
Whenever children come, give me their feet.
Like, honestly, even the Sangat that Baba Ji does, other than Baba Jaswant Singh Ji, everybody who lives in that house who constantly comes is a teenager or a 20 or 30-year-old.
You know why? Like, we even say it with you guys. Like, you are so full of energy and youthful that, like...
I get that from Randip Ji.
we get it off you guys. Like,
we talk about that. Like, yo, these guys are like...
Like, I can see why... Like, they see those teenage years are so precious, or like, you know, before 30 or whatever, because like after 30, like, and maybe that's just how we made the society, we let life hit us. But you guys are in that state of like, we're going to make the world a better place. You know, we have so much potential, you know, and like that energy is like, it makes you feel young by being around energy like that.
For sure.
Because it reinforces, like, you know, me being around you guys, like, oh, I want to try doing this. I want to try doing this. Right? Like, or this would be so cool if we were to cover a topic around this. Versus, like, if I talk to, right now, a lot of my friends are around our age, and they're like, I'm so tired. Who's going to go to sleep at 8 and who's going to sleep at 8:30, right? Because you're just so tired and caught in that bubble, right?
Like younger kids, like they fuel you. They fuel your ideas.
They fuel your ideas.
Curiosities and stuff. Like I tell my kids stuff, they're just like, yeah, that's possible. Let's do it. And like, they don't have any like, oh, it can't happen. If you go to an adult, they're like, but then did you think about this? And I'm like, when you tell a kid, you're like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, that's why I think it's good when both mindsets move together.
Yeah.
Because one brings the energy and one brings somewhat of the wisdom. And so one brings that fearlessness and one brings that
reality.
A little bit. Okay, but yeah, let's push it. Yeah, you guys can push it.
She's the reality. I'm the like, let's do whatever.
Yeah, it's a micro and the macro.
Yeah. I just like sometimes Amrit's ideas are so out of it, and I'm like, okay, like that's great, but there's nothing. There's no plan. I was like, we got to make a plan, you know.
It's like me and him. He's the macro. I'm the micro.
Yeah.
Like he's like, we're gonna dominate the world. I'm like, let's just start here, Prabhjot.
Yeah. Exactly the same thing with Amrit.
Like, oh my god. But yeah, that's what I think what kids bring, like, that fun, curiosity, playfulness, the willing to start again, the willing to see something for the first time, you know, that amazement, like, whoa, I didn't know the world has this, or the world is capable of this. Like, they're not,
and they're always in that because they're learning from everything. They're always everything new for them. It's such a new experience. And they're like, look, Dada, look at this. And they'd be like, smile. Do you see that smile? I'm like, yo, smile. But for them, it's so new. Like, everything they do is new.
That's true.
Like,
that's, yes. Like, every
that's
moment
true. Even when
new.
it comes to Barney, it's that, like, you know, you can take the curious mind.
No, it's the
beginner's mind. The beginner's mind is like, Tika, even though you've been a Vyasi for God knows how long, doesn't matter what you've done, it's still that next time when a person goes and sits again, it's that whoa. Like what did you say? Yeah. Right? It's like, whoa, okay. Oh, I never seen it from that lens. Whoa, that's nice too.
I remember one time I was talking to Gareebi Pothi Ji, and I took him to my class. Like I had a bunch of Gurmukhi classes, and I was like, Gareebi Pothi Ji is here. They're Gathavatic, and they're like, okay. And I was telling all these kids about like how we should be reading more Barney and like let's immerse ourselves in that. So they asked Yannick Ji, they're like, what are all the Barneys you read? And they're like, I do my Nityanim and I do Mool Mantra Jap. And they're like, that's it? And then he's like, they're like, literally, Gyani Ji said that I met a Baba Ji who was a crazy abhyasi, who always had a mala in their hand or whatever. And they're like, Baba Ji, like, you're 80 years old, you've been doing bhakti for so long. Tell me what you've been doing. I'm going to practice that too. They're like, straight up, I've been doing a Mool Mantra for 60 years. And every day I'm like, oh, that's what Satnam means. Right? They're like, you got to continue with that same thing.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's that beginner's
to have that mindset. That's amazing, man. Like Baba Buddha Sahib Ji is beautiful. Like he personifies that. You know what I mean? Even at that age, he's made it. Everything's done. Guru Sahiban de darshan karke bhi, fir bhi, he's still doing his nitane. He's still doing Amrit, waking up, doing Ishanan. Like, you know, he's Maryada fir bhi rakh de yaar. You know what I mean? Like,
and like with that joy that like you're doing it for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's your first time ever doing it.
Like doing it as that 3-year-old who would be doing it, because they're learning for the first time every day. That's like every day I'm a 3-year-old. Every day I'm gonna learn something new.
That's it.
Right?
And like not feel like I know it all.
Yeah, because that's your hankar again. Like that's why I think Bhagat Ji's like thing is like, yo, you can do whatever you want. Just if you have Gareebi, that's it. You've won life. Literally, you've won life if you have Gareebi.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
So, I mean, yeah, I think
ending remarks. Anything you guys want to say to wrap it up?
Yeah.
No, man. I think that's about it. I mean, there's a lot to say. But there are a lot of different topics we could go into, but...
I think like the last quote, a kid's quote, I remember someone said was, I lived life for the first 6 years, the rest is a memory. Right, so...
I don't understand that. So I'm not that like deep.
You know, so it's this understanding that kids... when they live life, they're fully in the present moment. You know,
6 years.
They're the first 6 years. Right?
They're like the concrete. You're not thinking. Your mind's not flying.
Planning, you're not worrying.
You're not thinking about the future.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about the past. There's no
you're
anxiety.
Just absorbing.
You're not depressed. You're not anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah. You're just
without
whatever
effort.
you're doing. It's
Yeah.
like, yo, you pick up this phone and, oh my God, look at this phone. This is like anything you do, you're just fully present in.
Yeah.
And you're just soaking it, like, you know, learning, like, look how little, like, the fact that a little human being that knows no language and within 6 years can say a full language without being taught, really. They're just absorbing it naturally without effort. Without any effort, right? But then once they say that we hit that 7-year mark, we become a thinking, rational human being. And then it's all a memory because we're always remembering the past or always remembering the future, right? Like we forget to like live in the like present moment and just enjoy the simpleness of just living, just breathing, just being. So I think that's like one thing, if I've taken from Yannick, is in life, like learn to appreciate and just be.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Good Prasad.
So we want to thank both of you guys so much.
And we're probably gonna come back again and again and again.
Yeah. There's still so much to talk
better
about.
organized because I feel like even today we flowed in so many different directions. But
It's good Prasad. It was an intro to the everything else that's coming.
It was a really good introduction of all the other topics that we're going to delve into. But we want to thank you. We want to say sorry to anyone, or if we said anything wrong, if we hurt anyone's feelings, that was never our intention. Please bless us with your asisa. Sada sada ihub ulan had nanak rakhan had apar. Vaheguru ji ka khasa, Vaheguru ji ki fateh.